You saw the setup, you knew the setup, every rule you follow said take it, and you didn't. Not because you were wrong about the trade, because something in you flinched a half second before your hand reached the mouse, and by the time it passed, the price had already moved. You watched it play out exactly the way you predicted, from the outside, as someone who didn't take it. If that's ever happened to you, this video is about the half second that cost you the trade and why it has almost nothing to do with your strategy. Here's a question worth holding on to for a minute. If you can look at a chart calmly, explain the setup out loud, and even write down exactly why it should work, why does your body still refuse to pull the trigger? Keep that question open, because the answer isn't a confidence problem, and it definitely isn't a knowledge problem. It's something faster than both of those. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly what's happening in the half second before you freeze. Most traders assume fear shows up as a feeling, a knot in the stomach, sweaty palms, a racing heart you can point to and name. That version of fear is real, but it's not the dangerous one. The dangerous one is faster than that. It's already made the decision before the feeling even has time to register, which means by the time you notice you're afraid, your body has often already acted on it. This is where the work of neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux becomes essential. Ledoux spent decades mapping exactly how fear moves through the brain, and what he found reshaped how an entire field understood the emotion. There isn't one path fear takes, there are two, running at completely different speeds. The slow path runs through your cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning, context, and the kind of careful analysis that lets you explain a setup out loud. The fast path skips all of that. It runs straight to a small structure called the amygdala, and it can trigger a full protective response before the cortex has even finished processing what's happening. Here's the part that matters most for anyone trading. Ledoux's research found that this fast path can act on incomplete, even inaccurate information. It's not evaluating whether this specific setup is actually risky. It's pattern matching against anything that has ever felt like danger before, and firing first, asking questions, never. Your cortex might already know the setup is good. Your amygdala doesn't care. It's not taking a vote. There's a detail in Ledoux's work that reframes this even further. He found that the fast path doesn't just act before the slow path finishes. In many cases, it actively influences what the slow path concludes afterward, coloring the reasoning that comes next to justify a decision that's already been made. This means the story you tell yourself about why you skipped the trade, it felt too risky, the timing seemed off, isn't necessarily an honest read of the setup at all. It's frequently an after-the-fact narrative your cortex builds to make sense of a decision the amygdala already forced. You didn't evaluate the risk and then hesitate. You hesitated and then evaluated the risk to explain the hesitation to yourself. So when you freeze on a clean setup, that's not you being weak. That's a genuinely older, faster system overriding a slower, more accurate one. And it's doing it in a fraction of the time it takes you to consciously notice anything happened at all. Your reasoning brain wasn't outvoted. It wasn't even in the room yet. Why does this matter more the longer you trade, instead of less? You'd think experience would fix it. Sometimes it does the opposite. There's a second piece of research that explains why. Psychologist Elizabeth Phelps has spent much of her career studying how emotion and decision-making interact, specifically how fear responses get attached to very particular cues with experience, not general risk in the abstract. Her research on fear conditioning found that once a specific loss gets linked to a specific pattern, even a coincidental one, that link can trigger the fast response again the next time something merely resembles it, regardless of whether the current situation is actually similar. The brain isn't asking whether this trade is like that trade, it's asking whether it feels like that trade. And feeling and actual similarity are not the same thing at all. This is why a trader can get burned once on a particular kind of setup and then freeze on genuinely good versions of that same setup for months afterward, sometimes years, without ever consciously connecting the two. The cortex has moved on, the amygdala hasn't gotten the memo, and it doesn't check in before acting. Phelps' work also found something that explains why this is so hard to catch in the moment. The cue that triggers the fear response is often something small and incidental, the exact shape of a candle, the specific time of day. even the particular way a chart was scrolling right before the loss happened, rather than the actual variable that made the trade risky. Which means the thing your brain has flagged as dangerous might have almost nothing to do with why the original trade actually failed. You're not just overgeneralizing from a real risk, you're sometimes reacting to a detail that was never the risk at all. Put these two findings together and the picture becomes uncomfortably clear. You're not fighting a lack of knowledge, you already have the knowledge. You're not fighting a lack of confidence either, not really. You're fighting a genuinely faster system that was built for a world with actual predators in it, repurposed by your brain to treat one bad trade the way it would treat an actual threat, and it will keep winning that race unless you change the conditions it's racing under. If you've ever hesitated on a setup you could defend perfectly in words and only realized afterward what happened, this is exactly why. And if that's landing right now, this is a good point to hit like and subscribe, because the next part is about the one thing that actually slows the fast path down, and it's not what most trading advice tells you to do. So what actually works if willpower can't outrun something that fires before willpower even gets involved? The instinct is to try to push through the fear directly, white-knuckle the trade, force your hand toward the mouse through sheer determination. This rarely works for long, and now you know exactly why. You're trying to outmuscle a system that isn't reachable through effort, because effort itself lives on the slow path, arriving after the decision's often already been made. What actually works is far stranger and much smaller. Ledoux's later research pointed towards something important. The amygdala's fast response can be retrained, but only through repeated, low-stakes exposure to the specific pattern it's reacting to, not through reasoning about it afterward. This is why simply reviewing a losing trade analytically rarely fixes the freeze. Analysis lives entirely on the slow path. The fear response lives somewhere the analysis can't reach on its own. The practical version looks like this. Before you ever risk real capital on the setup that makes you hesitate, run it small, genuinely small, small enough that a loss barely registers as a loss at all. Not to test the strategy, you likely already know it works, to give your amygdala new, low-stakes evidence that this specific pattern doesn't equal the danger it's been treating it as. Do this repeatedly, deliberately, on exactly the setup that makes you freeze, and something starts to shift that pure willpower never could touch. This works precisely because it mirrors how Ledoux found the fear response actually gets built in the first place, through repetition and direct experience, not through explanation. You can't argue your amygdala out of a fear the same way you couldn't have argued it into one. It learned the pattern through repeated exposure to a specific cue paired with a bad outcome, and it unlearns the same way, through repeated exposure to that same cue paired with a small, survivable, uneventful one. There's no shortcut through language for a system that never spoke language to begin with. This also explains something that trips a lot of traders up. Confidence built on a different setup doesn't transfer to this one. Self-belief in general doesn't retrain a specific fear response because the amygdala isn't reacting to your overall confidence level. It's reacting to this particular pattern, and it needs its own specific evidence, not borrowed evidence from somewhere else in your trading. So think back to that half second, the one where you saw the setup, knew the setup, and still didn't move. That wasn't a failure of knowledge, and it wasn't a failure of nerve either, not in the way you probably blamed yourself for afterward. It was a faster system doing exactly what it was built to do, reacting to a pattern instead of reasoning about a probability, and arriving well before your slower, more accurate brain even had a chance to weigh in. You can't outthink that system, but you can retrain it, small and deliberately, one low-stakes rep at a time, until the setup that used to make you freeze stops registering as danger at all. If this changed how you think about the trade you hesitated on last week, tell us in the comments what setup you're going to practice small on first. Hit like and subscribe for more of this. Thanks for watching.